Hello, good morning. I hope that everybody is well. Now my Flosstube is a day early this weekend, but I thought I would make it today so that I could update everybody on Hugo's visit with the cardiologist yesterday. Now the video will be about needlework, so it is a Flosstube. But I know there's so many people who are anxious to know the results of yesterday's visit. I've had so many emails of support and people sending positive thoughts and their prayers for little Hugo. Well, all those positive thoughts and prayers really paid off. It was a good news day yesterday. To start with, the snow stayed away, so we could travel over Bodmin Moor early in the morning without any problem. We got to our appointment early, and as we were the first appointment of the day, they saw us early. The cardiologist came out to meet us, and she was as delightful as she was, how she came across on the telephone. She spent some time acquainting herself with little Hugo because of COVID. He hasn't really met other people, and he's never been away from myself and Ray. He trotted off with her. He had a little sort of dither at the door of the surgery where he was looking back, but she gently coaxed him into the surgery. He was gone for about an hour, and we were sat in the car very anxiously waiting. She came out with him and she had a big smile on her face, so we immediately thought, oh gosh, this is good news. And we got out of the car and she just said yes and smiled and nodded her head, so that was really wonderful. Basically, Hugo has got a murmur, and it's known as an ejection or a flow murmur, and it's something that boxer puppies do get. So this really was the best possible outcome that we could have, that it's something that is common, and he should grow out of it. Boxers have these great big deep chests to house, their lungs and their hearts. They're powerful dogs. They're dogs of great endurance. They're very athletic, so their hearts tend to be bigger than some other breeds, and there's a lot of blood pumping through their hearts, and when the blood comes out of the chamber through the valve, there's like a lot of blood trying to get through a small place, and this is where that murmur, that sound comes from. So she feels confident that Hugo is going to grow out of it, and Hugo's going to go back when he's about 18 months, 2 years old, just to have another check, just to make sure that it hasn't developed into something else, but it's not expected to. So that was really great. And where I had been practicing with Hugo every morning, using my husband's electric shaver with the cover on, rubbing it up and down his chest and under his arms and on his stomach, with it switched on so there was the noise and the vibration. Hugo had got to look forward to these sessions because it was like having a massage. And at 5 months old, Hugo did not need to be sedated in any way for the vets. He was very happy to be on the table in the arms of the nurse whilst the cardiologist carried out the scan and other tests as well. And he was so content, he actually fell asleep and he was snoring, and they had to wake him up when they finished. I'm so pleased that he didn't have to be sedated. And what we were able to do on the way home, we stopped at Lanhydrock House, which is a beautiful National Trust property, one of my favourites. And although it's closed because of COVID, there are some fabulous woods just outside the parkland wall of the estate, and we walked through these woods, and then we came along a really lovely river, and we came up around the back of the house and came back to the car park. It was a wonderful walk, and we were so light in our footsteps. You know, our hearts were singing with happiness and joy, and the sky was blue. It was bitterly cold, but we were just so happy, and it was really, really lovely to walk with Hugo where he was running with Bertie, and we didn't have to keep our eyes on him, afraid something was going to happen, like his heart would stop or something like that. So we came home so happy, and when we got home we were absolutely exhausted, and I have to admit, I went to bed early last night and I woke up very late this morning, and I think I've just caught up on my sleep, and it was so lovely not to wake up this morning and immediately start worrying about little Hugo. So there we are. Wonderful, wonderful news. Stitching wise, well, I posted this photograph last night on Instagram and Facebook. This is my progress. I finished the sampler I showed in last weekend's Flosstube, and that's going to be framed as soon as my frame reopens after COVID, and that's going to be released at the end of the year. But the release for that's going to be a little bit special, and there'll be more about that towards the end of the year. But this little sampler, isn't that border just delicious? Really so pretty, so joyous. Gosh, joyous is the word of this Flosstube. I just love that little border. Now, this little sampler, I'm stitching this with a Verosoir 103, and the colours are delightful. The colours make my heart sing, let alone this really sort of pretty, delicate design. This little sampler, it's not a reproduction. This border comes from a sampler that I have in my collection, and the border is not true to the original. So this is an inspiration, not a reproduction. The border on the original, now this little border, it's quite simple. It's 3 stitches, 2 stitches, 2 stitches, 3 stitches, 2 stitches, 2 stitches, 3 stitches. So it's just going along like that. I spent originally 3 days, and I mean 3 full days, trying to get this border to meet up. And this little girl, she was a stinker. Her stitching is over 1 when it should be over 2, and it could be 1 on the one side, 2 on the other, so it's not a square cross stitch. She goes over 3 sometimes. She is all over the place, and there was no way that this border was ever going to meet up charting it over 2. So in the end I decided that this was going to be an inspiration, not a reproduction. So I've tidied up this border, and the colours are predominantly the ones the little girl chose, but I did tweak 1 or 2 of them. Tonight I'm going to start to fill the border in, but I woke up this morning with an idea in my head about this sampler, so I'm going to cogitate on it throughout the day, and what gets stitched inside this border might be very different to what I was originally going to stitch inside it. We shall see. Okay, so that was my stitching this week. A sampler came, an antique sampler, and it's this little one. And you might say, oh, that's just another red sampler. Well, yes, it is another red sampler, but this one, when I stopped and I read what the little girl had stitched, my heart just just somersaulted, and I thought, oh, I must have that one and I must reproduce it. Now, if we look at this sampler, we shall see that it says Hannah Wilkinson worked this first, second and part of the third alphabet in the 11th year of her age and died May the 12th, 1835, aged 11 years and 4 months. So Hannah was obviously stitching this sampler when she died. So if we look to the bottom, it says Ellen Wilkinson finished this work May the 21st, 1841. So that is so I was going to say that was X years later than her. Oh yes, it is. Yeah, there's the date. 1835 from 1841. That's 6 years later. She finished this sampler when she was 13 years old. And the verse that was stitched is lovely. So this lovely bud, so young and fair, called hence by early doom, just came to show how sweet a flower in paradise would bloom. See the kind shepherd Jesus stands with all engaging charms. Mark how he calls the tender lambs and folds them in his arms. That is just so touching. And I really, really felt that this little sampler ought to be reproduced, and Hannah and Ellen Wilkinson should be remembered. So, so touching. I think that Hannah must have got to the M. I think that there is a slight change between the M and the N, so I think that's where she got in the third alphabet when she died. And you know, when you hold this and you think of little Hannah, her little hands, you know, holding this linen and stitching, and then Ellen finishing it off. So if Ellen was 13, 6 years later, she would have been 7 when her 11-year-old sister passed away. I think it's just so, so touching. Maybe this was just left in a workbox and Ellen came and found it and decided that she would finish this as a tribute to her sister. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reproducing this and celebrating Ellen's love for her sister. I'm often asked what makes me decide on a sampler to stitch, or you know, just to acquire, and it can be all sorts of things. That one, it just touched me so much. We've all lost loved ones, and we know that sort of aching gap in our hearts and our lives when we lose a loved one. Now, the reason I bought this sampler, again, it's another red sampler. I love red. This one is because of the way that Ruth Gibb stitched her name. When I saw this sampler, that caught my eye, and I had a quick look on Ancestry for Ruth Gibb, and I found her. She tells us she was aged 11 in 1882. So Ruth was born in 1871, and she was born in Chiddingly, Sussex. And she married Arthur George Pellin, and she lived until 86 years of age, dying in 1958. On the back of the sampler, it has for Mr. Duncan Gibb or members of his family, and it gives an address. So obviously, I think that whoever had this sampler, and it might have been Ruth herself, wrote on the back of the sampler who this sampler was to be passed on to. So interesting, it really, really is. Now, when I was researching Ruth, I found a copy of her signature on her marriage bands, and you can see that her signature, although it's several years later from when she stitched this sampler, you can see her signature on her marriage bands is very similar to how she stitched her name on this sampler, and it was that caused me to buy this sampler. I was really not intrigued, but really taken with an 11-year-old girl had already practiced her writing her name and developing a style, a signature at 11 years of age, and she was obviously very proud of the way she signed her name, and she signed her sampler. I think that was really nice, so that's why I bought this little sampler. I'm sure that this will be reproduced at some stage. Last week's video, there was so much in it that I never got to talk about this sampler, which was at the back of the display. This sampler is Mary Ann Ragg, and Mary Ann stitched a sampler aged 12 in 1826. I did show the original sampler way back last year when we went into lockdown, and I charted the sampler. Robert Harris in Texas has stitched the sampler, and this will be released this year. I'm trying to release one large sampler a month. It's not quite going to plan, but that's what I'm trying to do, one large sampler each month. It's a beautiful sampler. We know that this is a sampler that was stitched in Sheffield. These trees and this house and the way this cartouche is stitched tells us that, because we have other samplers in our collection from Sheffield and we're able to compare them. But we've also found Mary Ann Ragg as well in the records. Funnily enough, this little sampler stitched by Hannah and Ellen was also stitched very close to Sheffield in Attercliffe, and I believe that Attercliffe is now a suburb of Sheffield, but at the time it was stitched it was very close to Sheffield. And Sheffield is in Yorkshire in the north of England. Okay, so I think really it is a very short video this week. I didn't sort of buy any needlework goodies. I was very tempted by some wooden needlework accessories that popped up on Facebook. Here's a picture of some of them in this lady's Etsy store, and I believe the lady's name is Danielle, and the store is in Italy. I dithered because I loved every single thing that she has in her Etsy store, but I can't have every single thing, and I'm trying to choose one thing to treat myself to. I'd be very interested to know what you would choose if you were ordering from this store. I shared the link with a friend, and she's ordered 2 really beautiful items from this store. There are so many lovely needlework related goodies to have. There really are. Okay, I'm starting to waffle, so I'm going to say stay safe, stay well, and if God is kind, I'll be back next week, hopefully with a little bit more needlework to show you. Bye.